On January 7th, 1969, Jane Britton failed to show up for an exam. This was highly out of character for the Harvard graduate student. She was the daughter of an accomplished scholar and had graduated magna cum laude with her bachelor's degree from Radcliffe College before beginning her advanced studies in anthropology. Her classmate and boyfriend, James Humphreys, tried calling to check on her after the exam. When Jane had failed to answer the phone, he headed over to her fourth-floor apartment on the University Road. There, at 12:40 in the afternoon, James discovered Jane's body, lying face down on her bed. Jane had had an eventful evening filled with outings with friends and her boyfriend on the night of January 6th, and stopped by her neighbor's apartment for a glass of sherry on her way home at approximately 11:30 p.m. Jane's autopsy showed she had alcohol in her stomach, but tests for alcohol in her blood came back negative, meaning that she had been attacked shortly after returning home. The autopsy also showed that she had been sexually assaulted and died as a result of a beating so severe that fragments of her skull had cut and bruised her brain. A neighbor reported hearing someone out on the fire escape the night of the murder, leading police to believe that the perpetrator had used the fire escape to gain entry to Jane's apartment. Jane's case garnered national media attention, but the investigation ultimately went cold. In July 2018, the Massachusetts State Police got a soft hit in the FBI's combined DNA index system to DNA found at Jane's crime scene. The DNA that remained available for testing yielded a YSTR profile, a type of profile that is specific to men because it involves analysis of the Y chromosome. They were able to confirm the match after finding a DNA profile on Ancestry.com that belonged to a male relative of the killer. The relative provided a fresh sample that confirmed the match. On November 20th, 2018, the Middlesex County District Attorney announced that Jane's killer had been identified through DNA as Michael Sumter, a career criminal who died of cancer in 2001 at 54, shortly after completing a prison sentence for a rape he committed in 1975. The new DNA tests eliminate 99.92% of the male population as contributors of the DNA at the crime scene, confirmed the soft hit in CODIS, and eliminated Michael's brother, the relative with the Ancestry.com profile, as a possible contributor of the DNA. Since his death, Michael has also been identified as the perpetrator in 4 other sexual assaults, 2 of which also resulted in the murder of the victim. Jane's case is the oldest cold case solved by the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office in its history. Leslie Marie Perlov was a graduate of Stanford University. The 21-year-old was working at the North County Law Library in Palo Alto, California, while waiting to begin law school at the University of Pennsylvania in 1973. She was a brilliant and dedicated student, but her hard work would tragically never culminate in an Ivy League law degree. Lisa was last seen alive at work on February 13, 1973, at 3 p.m. That same day, her Chevrolet Nova was found abandoned near a quarry off of Old Page Mill Road. 3 days later, her body was discovered west of where her car had been found, under an oak tree. She had been strangled and left face down with her skirt pulled up past her waist. The case would have to wait for technology to advance before it could be solved. In July 2018, DNA found on Leslie's body was submitted to Parabon Nanolabs, a company in Virginia that combines DNA analysis with forensic genealogy. Using the information the lab provided, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office was able to identify a suspect. They collected a discarded DNA sample, a sample collected from an item used by the suspect that they have thrown away or left behind somewhere, to confirm that the suspect's DNA matched the sample from Leslie's body. On November 20th, 2018, the suspect, 74-year-old John Arthur Jetro, was arrested and charged with murder during an attempted rape in connection with Leslie's death. The odds of someone other than Jetro contributing the DNA found on Leslie's body have been estimated to be 1 in 65 septillion. Jatru had been working as a security guard in Palo Alto in 1973. This was in spite of the fact that in 1964, he had raped and killed the 16-year-old daughter of the chaplain for the Army's 8th Infantry Division. The crime occurred in Germany, where Jatru's father, who was an officer in the Army, was stationed. Since 18-year-old Jatru was considered a juvenile under German law, he was eligible to be released and sent back to the United States after just 2 years in prison. In the end, it was Leslie and her tenacity that helped authorities close the case. At a press conference announcing Jatru's arrest, Santa Clara County Deputy District Attorney Matt Bracker said, "Leslie Perlov solved this case because she fought desperately for her life. In the process, she gathered the DNA evidence that was used to identify the killer." 25-year-old Christy Mirack was a 6th grade teacher at Rohrerstown Elementary School in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. On December 21, 1992, Christy's roommate left for work at 7 a.m., while Christy was watching some TV before leaving herself. Christy's normal routine was to wake up early so she could have a leisurely morning before leaving for work at 7:45. However, she never arrived at school that morning. When Christy failed to show up for work, the principal of the school tried calling her home multiple times, but received no answer. He then called Christy's mother to see if she had heard from her. She had not. She gave the principal Christy's address, and he began to drive to her home, hoping to see her car broken down somewhere along her route. He did not. When he arrived at Christy's apartment, the front door was cracked open. Inside, the principal discovered Christy's badly beaten body. It would later be determined that she had been strangled and raped. Evidence at the scene suggested that Christy had fiercely fought her killer. She was still wearing her coat and gloves, as though she had been attacked just as she was leaving the house. As the person who discovered Christy's body, the principal was an early suspect, as was Christy's boyfriend, who turned out to be a married man 20 years her senior. All of these potential early suspects were quickly ruled out. 26 years after the murder, DNA evidence would point the investigation to a complete surprise of a suspect. DNA had been found on and near Christy's body, but her killer's DNA was not in any criminal database, so police could never find a match for it. In 2015, the case was taken over by a cold case unit. In 2017, the unit also reached out to Parabon Nanolabs, who generated a composite of what the killer may have looked like at different ages based on the traits in his DNA. The composites were released to the public in November 2017, but no one reported knowing anyone who resembled them. In 2018, forensic genealogist C.C. Moore, in partnership with Parabon, entered the DNA profile from the crime scene into an open-source genealogy site to locate distant relatives of the perpetrator. From there, she was able to narrow down the suspect pool to a family in Lancaster County and ultimately identify a single suspect. The police surveilled the suspect and collected a water bottle and some chewing gum the suspect discarded. When the DNA from these items was tested, it was a match to the DNA from the crime scene. On June 25, 2018, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office announced the arrest of Raymond Charles Rowe for Christy's murder. 49-year-old Rowe was well known in the local community. He was a local DJ, publicly known as DJ Freeze. In 1992, he was the house DJ at the Chameleon Club, a popular music venue, and by 2018, he was one of the most sought-after wedding DJs in Lancaster County. He was a husband and a father, and had recently become very religious. His only criminal charge was for disorderly conduct, which was incurred in 2001 when he played music too loudly while DJing. That charge was ultimately dismissed. Rowe is expected to go to trial in May of 2019, more than 26 years after the murder of Christy Mirack. On March 19, 1993, a 6-year-old boy in Toronto called 911. The child had woken up and discovered the body of his mother, 41-year-old Barbara Brodkin. When the police arrived at the apartment at 155 Balliol Street, they discovered that Barbara had been stabbed once in the chest. During their initial investigation, authorities interviewed over 100 people, but could not make an arrest in the case. In August of 2017, Barbara's case was reopened. Evidence from her crime scene was submitted in hopes that it would reveal DNA evidence that could not have been identified in 1993. The effort was successful. On October 19, 2018, police arrested 63-year-old Charles Mustard. Charles was known to police, which is why his DNA was available for them to compare to the DNA from the crime scene. A small amount of money and marijuana had been missing from Barbara's apartment, leading police to initially believe that Barbara had been the victim of a robbery. But Charles was an acquaintance of Barbara and her family, meaning there may have been a more personal motive in the crime. While police believe the DNA evidence proves that Charles committed the crime, they still have an appeal to the public to help with the case. They asked at a news conference following Charles' arrest for two individuals, known only to them as Linda and Dirk, to come forward. Linda and Dirk were reportedly acquaintances of both Barbara and Charles, and authorities believe they may have important information that may help in convicting Charles.